So I called this one level 1 because it wasn't much, like it already just had an x squared. What made it harder is when you have numbers, right? A number in front of the x squared. That would make it a little bit harder. But our goal is to get something squared by itself so you can square root both sides. What I'd like you to do is we are going to do a more difficult one. I'm going to say this is like level 3 or 4. 3x squared plus 5x minus 7 equals 0. And I'm going to draw a straight line down here because I said we'd go to the hardest level next after doing this one. But if we can do this one, then we should be able to do the harder level one. But we have to think through what's the logical stuff that we've done all the way along. So, logically all the way around. You notice how we always put the number on the other side. So I'm going to add 7 to both sides. Because you want something squared equals a number. So it makes sense to move that number over. When we want something squared, do we have a 3 out in front of the x squared? That causes a problem. So we need to divide by 3. And I purposely made this one more difficult so that we have fractions. But if I divide everything by 3, that's going to be done a nice x squared. This is going to turn into a 5 over 3x. And this, when I divide by 3, is going to be 7 over 3. And now we get to our biggest challenge so far. And if you've noticed the pattern all the way through, you'll be able to get this. What was the pattern? Someone, I haven't told you yet, but some of you have figured it out. What did we notice from that number to the other number? It's always divided by 2. Have you noticed that pattern? Right? Dividing by 2 is the same as multiplying by 0.5 or multiplying by a half. If you think of multiplying by a half, your life will be easier because 5/3 divided by 2 is a little bit hard to do, but if you do 5/3 times a half, you're going to get plus, oops, I want that in the bottom, plus 5 over 6. Okay? What number goes in the space? What do you always have to do with this number to put it in the space? Square it, right? I didn't tell you that either. I didn't tell you the divide by 2. But you guys figured this out because it makes sense when you're multiplying it out, right? This is divide by 2 to get this one. Then we had to square this. And if you take 5 over 6 times 5 over 6, you will get plus 25 over 36 and plus 25 over 36. Ooh. This is why this is like level 4 and 5, because the numbers aren't as nice. Okay? And I tried to pick numbers as not nice as possible, but still be small. Like 3, 5, and 7 aren't very big numbers. What do I have to do to add those two together? I need to get a common denominator. Can you see a common denominator would be 36. So when I add, I'd have to times this by 12. I'm going to get 84 over 36 plus that's 25. 84 and 25 is 109 over 36. What did we do next once we got the squared? Square rooted. And so when I square root both sides, I'm going to get x plus 5 over 6 equals plus or minus. And I square root both sides. Are you okay if I do this right away? Because the top is going to be square root of 109. At the bottom, when I square root, it's going to just be 6. And now I can get x by itself by moving the 5 over 6 over to the other side. And actually what's nice about this one is I already have a common denominator. And you will get questions where your final answers are going to look like this. But we're going to learn an easier way than completing the square. But first we have to do something harder. What would be harder than the numbers that I chose? Letters. Would that be harder? If instead of doing numbers, we did letters? And in fact, this is how mathematicians make formulas. They're like, I want to make a formula that solves this every single time. If it solves it every single time, I don't know what the 3 is. I have to pick a letter. So the letter I choose, I don't know, maybe I'll go with A. A is any number. And then what could I choose? I need a number for the second one. Could be different, so I'll pick B. And a number for the third one could be different, so I pick C. And I make it equal to 0. And if we can do it with letters, the answer that we're going to get in the end is going to be a formula. And if your math teacher is really nice to you, that formula is on your formula sheet. I don't know. Other people are looking. I sure hope it's on there. Didn't want to make myself out to be mean. Okay, we'll find out. We'll find the formula, what it is in the end, and then we'll check our formula sheets to see if it's on there. So, we have to solve what we did on the left now with letters. What did we do first? We moved the 7 over. So what should we do on the letter side? Move the C over. Okay. If I move the C over, do you see that it become a negative C? What did we do next?
We divide bx by h.
Yeah, we divided.
Minus c by h.
Yeah, so we're going to divide everything by a to get the x squared by itself. Well, what does that do to my b?
Bx over a.
B over a equals, and this would be c over a. This would be very hard unless you figured out the pattern that you did. Okay? What number has to go in here?
B over 2a.
You have to take the number and divide it by 2 or multiply it by half. So it's going to be b over 2a. And what you're noticing right now is that when you do complicated things, like this is what on the right is really complicated because we're using variables all the way through. But if you can do it with something easier, and you have that as a reference, then you can do it with something more complicated. So we divided it by 2. What would have to go into this space? What did we always do to this number? Squared it. So I have to b over 2a times b over 2a. How do you multiply fractions? You multiply the top. See, that would give you b squared. And you multiply the 2a times the 2a. That will be 4a squared. That's what would add there. So we also have to add b squared over 4a squared there as well. How do I get the number that's going to be here?
We add the right.
I have to add those two together. What do I need to add those two together? I need a common denominator. Does it make sense that this needs to be multiplied by 4a and 4a? Okay. So when I add them together, I now have a common denominator of 4a squared. And on the top, if I put them together, I have a negative 4ac plus b squared. Are you okay if I write the b squared first? so we don't have a negative first, and it will be b squared minus 4ac. What did we do next?
Square root it.
We square root it. So this side is just going to become x plus b over 2a. And this side, be plus or minus, I'll square root the top. And can you see when you square root the bottom? The square root of 4 is 2. The square root of a squared, technically absolute value, but because we have the plus or minus, we can just write a. It's going to be fine that way.
You forgot the C.
Yes, I forgot the C. Sometimes this, don't know why, as I write things, letters disappear. But I might have forgot that C completely. Okay? And now how do you get x by itself?
Subtract
You have to subtract the, oops,
b over 2a.
subtract the b over 2a. Do we have a common denominator?
Yes.
Oh, this is nice.
Yay.
Check your formula sheet. Is this on your formula sheet? It is? Yes! It's on your formula sheet for 2 more years. And then you have to have it memorized. Or, you don't have to have it memorized and you just have to do this every time you want to figure it out. Okay? Now, what was the original question that we did on this side? The original question we did on this side was, here I'll do it in blue, was it 3x squared plus 5x minus 7 equals 0? Correct? And now we're going to solve this one not with completing the square, but with the new formula we just figured out. In our new formula, our a is 3, our b is 5, and our c is minus 7. So if you want to use the quadratic formula, this is how easy it gets. Formula says put a negative, what's your b value? Negative 5 plus or minus the square root. B squared will be 25 minus 4. The a value is 3. And the b value is minus 7. All divided by 2 times my a value is 3. Negative 5 plus or minus. This is 12 times 7, 84 plus 84, 84 plus 25, 109. 2 times 3, 6. Oh my goodness. That's pretty cool. We created a formula by solving by square rooting. Once you have that formula, it works for everything. And it allows you to take an equation like this, which I know I'd have to divide by 3 if I was solving by square rooting and would have fractions. I would look at that and go, ugh, I don't want to do that level 4 question because it has so many fractions. Isn't it nicer that we have a formula that just lets us plug things in, right? In 2 steps, we got the answer. But we first had to do the complicated solving to get the equation. And then it gets put on our formula sheet, so we don't have to do that every time in case we forget. So now you have 3 methods. You could solve by factoring. You could solve by square rooting, or you could solve with the formula.
Can we decide which one we use in the test?
Sometimes. So, can we decide which one we use on the test? Sometimes a question will say, solve by factoring. Then you have to factor. Sometimes it'll say, solve by completing the square. Then you have to do the completing the square method. And sometimes it'll say, solve by the quadratic formula. But if it just says solve, you
I
get
can
to
decide,
choose.
yeah.
Okay? So I will now do one that can be solved by all three methods, and you decide which one you like the best. Okay? Here it is, x squared minus 6x plus, no, I'm going to go plus 6x minus 8. I'm not going to use 6x. I'm going to use minus 2x minus 8 equals 0. There we go. X squared minus 2x minus 8 equals 0. Our three techniques. I will start with our first technique that we learned, which was using factoring and the zero product property. If it factors, that would have to be x and x. Two numbers to give us 8.
2 and 4.
2 and 4. We need to get a minus 2, so it would be minus 4 and plus 2, which would make this 0. Minus 2, what would make this 0? 4. These are two answers with factoring. Method 2, I'll go to green. If I want to complete the square and solve by square rooting, I would move the 8 over to the other side. X squared minus 2x equals 8. Then this has to be something squared, and the minus 2 tells me it needs to be a minus 1, which means I would need to add 1 there and add 1 there, making this equal to 9. Square root both sides. Square root of 9 works out nicely to plus or minus 3. Add 1 to both sides, you get x equals 1 plus or minus 3. Well, if I do the plus 3, I get x equals 4. If I do the minus 3, I get x equals minus 2. Same answers, which is good. You'd hate to have 3 different methods that all work, but all give you different answers. That might be problematic. And we could also do this one. I'll go to purple, using the formula. So I'll rewrite the question here. It was x squared minus 2x minus 8 equals 0. So what's my a value? My a value, there's not a number written there, is going to be a 1. My b value is minus 2. My c value is minus 8. And I put everything into my formula. So x equals negative negative 2. Do you see that would become a positive 2? Plus or minus. Careful with the negative. Negative 2 squared is not negative 4. Right? In fact, if you write this in your work, you will lose a half a mark. Because that negative 2 needs to be in brackets. Otherwise, order of operations says square first, then multiply by the negative 1, and you will get negative 4. Or if you go to your calculator and think you're being all clever, and you type into your calculator negative 2 squared, you will get negative 4. Because your calculator knows order of operations. This is different than negative 2 all squared, which is positive 4. So just be careful with your calculator, because sometimes your calculator gives you the wrong answer if you type in the wrong stuff. Okay, minus 4. A is 1, C was negative 8. All over 2 times A, which is 1. So we get x equals 2, plus or minus. 4 plus 32 is 36, all divided by 2, which is 2 plus or minus 6, all divided by 2. If I do 2 plus 6, I get 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. If I do 2 minus 6, I get negative 4. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. All three techniques will give you the right answer all three times. In this example, I think the factoring is the nicest. Okay? I think that completing the square or solving by square rooting was second nicest, actually. And I think the quadratic formula was the least nice. But in the first one that we did, here, this one, you can't factor, so factoring is the worst. The completing the square rooting method had lots of fractions. It's the second worst. This one, the quadratic formula, is the nicest. There are examples where each one of these three methods, one of them is the nicest. But you don't necessarily know which is the nicest. You get to sort of figure it out after you've done a few, right? I always think factoring is the nicest if you can factor, but that means you have to get good at factoring to make it the nicest. If you all of a sudden don't get good at factoring, then you'd probably go to the quadratic formula. I like the solve by square rooting when it's just an x squared plus an even number. It's an even number because then dividing by 2 works out nicely. If it can't be factored, and it's an even number and a nice one, then I like the square rooting method better than the formula. And we'll see some like that, why it's better. But you have the choice. If it just says solve, you can pick which method you want. But sometimes, to make sure you know all the methods, I will ask you all three. So at the bottom of the next page, you have the quadratic formula. We just solved it. We figured out how it was, and now we can go to example 1. And it says solve, so you would be allowed to use any of the three techniques. We just learned the quadratic formula. These are both very similar. So I'm going to do the first one with the quadratic formula. Both of these cannot be factored, so we won't solve any of these with factoring. But if I'm using the quadratic formula, and I'm going to just write it out. My b value is 2, so I'd have negative 2 plus or minus b squared, which will be 4, minus 4. A is 1. C is 7. Okay. Over 2 times a, which is 1. And I will get negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus 24 is negative 24 over 2. These ones can be your most favorite questions. The answer to this one is that there is no answer. If you get a negative inside of your square root, there is no solution. It is not possible. Unless you start using imaginary numbers, but we are not going to go there right now. That one has no solution. If you did this one, with it completing the square, you would have got to this point. You would have got to x plus 1 squared equals 12. Negative 12. And then when you go to square root both sides, do you see that you still have a negative inside the square root? That's why the solving by completing the square would give you a problem as well. Okay, so this one has no solution. I'm actually going to do the second one with both the formula. We'll do the formula first, and then the square rooting method, because this is an example of where the square rooting method is going to be nicer than the formula. Factoring does not work. So using the formula, you would get x equals negative 2 would be positive 2 plus or minus negative 2 squared is 4 minus 4, a is 1, c is negative 7 over 2 times a. Four plus 28 will be 32 over 2. There's your quadratic formula. But it is not simplified. What can you pull out?
16.
A 16. So this becomes 2 plus or minus 4 root 2 over 2. And then can you see that all three things can divide by 2? So because all three things can divide by 2, you simplify it, and your final answer is 1 plus or minus 2 root 2. One of the negative sometimes of the quadratic formula is you have to simplify after you do it. And this is a good example of that. Because you're like, yay, I've got my answer right here. But then I have to simplify my square root of 32. Then I have to simplify my fraction and get 1 plus or minus 2 root 2 in the end. Had we used the completing the square, check it out. Move the 7 over. This is, for me, an example of a great completing the square one, because that's an even number. This is really easy to see that this is going to be minus 1, which means we add 1 here and add 1 there. Equals 8. Square root both sides. You still had to simplify the root 8, but you didn't have to worry about the dividing part. I think you get your answer a little bit quicker with the solving by square rooting in that one. Okay, questions we can write down. 7, 8, 9, 10. Give you some time to work on these now. 11, 12, and 13. Oh my goodness.